Game continued. Or red alert. All hands. Battle stations. This is not a drill. This is not maybe someday. This is not another YouTube monologue guessing what could happen. What I'm about to show you, what I'm about to prove with documentation, is the single most important event in the modern history of the silver market. For 15 years, J.P. Morgan Chase has been the final boss, the wall, the gatekeeper, the bank that stood between the silver community and price discovery, rigging the market so brazenly they paid $920 million to the U.S. government for precious metals manipulation, and kept playing the same game anyway. The bank that carried one of the largest short positions the market has ever seen. The bank that smashed price every time momentum turned against them. The bank that turned supply and demand into a punchline. That fortress just fell. And I have the document that proves it. At 4:47 a.m. Eastern, on January 6, 2026, an internal risk management memo circulated to 17 senior executives at J.P. Morgan Chase. The subject line, urgent, silver position liquidation, protocol initiation, 8 pages, dense technical legal language, risk math, execution controls, but buried inside paragraph 3 are 3 words that changed the entire war. Initiate covering operations. Read that again. J.P. Morgan is covering. They're unwinding the short, the 6.2 billion ounce short. The position that, according to everyone who's watched this market for 2 decades, has acted like a boot on silver's throat. That position is being unwound right now. Today, this week, this quarter. And I'm going to show you exactly why they had no choice, exactly how they plan to do it, and exactly what price their own analysts believe silver can hit as this unfolds. Because the number in the memo isn't $100. It isn't $200. It's $412 per ounce. Well, not maybe. Not some bull case fantasy. 412, the level their risk team believes silver can reach during the covering process. And before you dismiss that as impossible, you need to understand the math that traps them. Because when you're forced to buy 6.2 billion ounces in a market that produces roughly 800 million ounces per year, and when your short is 7.75 times annual global production, the outcome becomes simple. Either the price goes vertical or you default. Those are the only 2 doors left, and J.P. Morgan chose vertical. Before we break down the memo, before I walk you through the 3 crises that forced this capitulation, you need to understand who J.P. Morgan is in silver. This is not a bank with an opinion. This is enemy headquarters. J.P. Morgan isn't just in the silver market. J.P. Morgan is the silver market. They're a major COMEX vault operator. They control enormous physical flows. They sit at the center of derivatives, swaps, options, futures, writing paper claims like they're printing receipts. When you trade silver on COMEX, there's a strong chance J.P. Morgan is on the other side. They're the house. They're the casino. And for 15 years, the house has been running the table. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice charged J.P. Morgan for manipulating precious metals markets for years, spoofing fake orders, coordinated hits during thin hours. The evidence was overwhelming. They paid $920 million. That's not pocket change. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's the government saying, yes, this happened. And the market moved on because the profits were bigger than the penalty. So the game continued, and anyone who said the quiet part out loud got labeled a conspiracy theorist. But today, J.P. Morgan just wrote the confession in a risk memo, because this memo isn't about prudently reducing exposure. It's about survival. Here's what the memo states, in substance. It identifies J.P. Morgan's net short position across silver instruments, COMEX futures, OTC swaps, derivative contracts, as approximately 6.22 billion ounces of notional exposure. It claims the position was accumulated from 2010 to 2024 at an average entry price around $18.47 per ounce. It cites current market price near 79.30, and then it drops the line that should make your stomach tighten. Unrealized losses, $377.1 billion, critical threat to firm solvency. Stop. That's JP Morgan saying internally, this can kill us. And then it gets worse. The memo states 3 factors have converged into an untenable risk position, requiring immediate action. 3 crises, 3 simultaneous fires, all pointing to one conclusion: cover or die. Crisis 1, regulatory pressure, the gun to the head. According to the memo, the CFTC held an emergency closed-door session with JP Morgan senior management on December 30th, 2025. Not a routine meeting, an emergency session. And the message was essentially this: your concentrated short has grown so large it threatens orderly market functioning. Reduce it fast, or we will force liquidation under emergency authority. The memo claims JP Morgan was issued a directive cut position size by at least 50% within 90 days. Think about what that means. If JP Morgan tries to stall, negotiate, or manage optics, the regulator can step in and force closure at market. And when forced liquidations happen, nobody cares about your losses. They care about shutting the position. So JP Morgan faces a brutal choice: cover voluntarily on their timeline, or get executed by a regulator on the regulator's timeline. A 50% reduction in 90 days implies covering 3.1 billion ounces by early April. That's roughly 34 million ounces per day for 90 days. In a market where total daily liquidity is nowhere near built for that kind of constant demand, that's how you get vertical moves. Crisis 2, vault inventory, the delivery catastrophe. The memo claims an internal audit completed on December 31st, 2025, found JP Morgan vaults hold around 380 million ounces available for delivery. But it also claims outstanding delivery obligations on maturing contracts and OTC swaps total about 1.24 billion ounces over the next 6 months. That's a shortfall of roughly 860 million ounces. Translation: they've promised more silver than they can deliver. And the memo's legal assessment is blunt. Failure to deliver exposes them to class action litigation with potential damages exceeding $300 billion. Because commodity delivery failures don't end with oops. Damages scale with replacement cost. If you owe silver at $70 and physical replacement is $200, you don't owe an apology. You owe the difference, times hundreds of millions of ounces, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages, plus reputational collapse. This is the trap inside the trap. They can't deliver, and they can't admit they can't deliver, so they must buy. Crisis 3, the algorithm, their own machine turns on them. This is the part that should terrify anyone who understands how firms like this operate. The memo references a proprietary risk system, Silver VAR9, guiding position management since 2015. For years, it said the risk was manageable. So they stayed short. They added, they pressed. But on December 28, 2025, the memo says the model hit a critical threshold. It now projects an 87% probability of a catastrophic loss event if the position isn't reduced within 6 months. 87. That's not a warning. That's a countdown. And what does catastrophic loss mean in the memo? It projects silver reaching 400 plus by Q3 2026 if covering doesn't begin immediately. So their own system, built by the smartest people in their commodities division, is screaming that the playbook has stopped working. No more one more smash, no more one more paper push, no more we'll roll it forward. Because the model is telling them the end state is extinction, so they moved, cover now, survive now. Now let's talk about why 6.2 billion ounces is not merely large. It's structurally impossible because this isn't a stock. You can't print more. You can't ramp mines overnight. Silver is physical, geological, bottlenecked by production. Global mine production is around 800 million ounces per year. JP Morgan's alleged short is 7.75 years of global production. And even that number understates the problem, because much of production never hits open market supply. A huge portion goes directly to industrial users through contracts. Solar, electronics, medical, defense, silver that disappears from tradable float. If only 250-300 million ounces a year are truly available to absorb speculative buying and bank covering, then the reality becomes grotesque. They need to compress decades of buying into months. That's why the price can't grind up. It has to reprice violently until sellers appear. And according to the memo, the level their risk team believes creates enough supply response is 412. Call it the controlled explosion price. Not because it's safe, because it's the lowest level they believe prevents total systemic collapse. And here's where the story goes from big to apocalyptic. JP Morgan is not the only short. They're the biggest, but not alone. If JP Morgan starts covering, other shorts will read the signal instantly. Nobody wants to be the last short. The last short gets executed at the worst price. So you don't get one bank covering, you get a stampede. Multiple banks chasing scarce physical supply in a market that cannot meet the demand. That's not a squeeze, that's a black hole. Price doesn't rise linearly. It gaps, it spikes, it moves faster than your emotions can catch up. Now the memo's execution plan, according to your text, lays out a 6-month timeline. Month 1, January. Stealth accumulation off market. Private deals with miners, sovereign sellers, large blocks designed to avoid obvious COMEX impact. Month 2, February. Controlled market purchases, slow futures, buying and delivery standing, enough to start moving the tape. Month 3, March. Accelerated covering, aggressive contract buying, OTC unwind pressure, volatility explosion. Month 4, April. CFTC deadline phase, maximum intensity to show 50% reduction. Month 5, May. Final push, locking forward supply contracts at high prices to neutralize remaining exposure. Month 6, June. Stabilization, consolidation around the new equilibrium as the market realizes the biggest seller became the biggest buyer. And the key psychological trap is this. Month 1 doesn't look like a moonshot on the chart. That's the point. That's the stealth phase, the calm before the storm. So let's hit the skeptic question head on. If this is real, why isn't silver already at $200? Because the opening phase is designed to be invisible, private flow, off-exchange blocks, quiet accumulation. But stealth has an expiration date. Once buying shifts into open market demand, once delivery pressure shows up in spreads, premiums, inventory, and settlement behavior, the illusion breaks. And when the market realizes JP Morgan has flipped from suppressor to buyer, the price doesn't politely walk higher, it jumps. Now listen carefully to this next part, because it's where people get trapped. Paper is not the same as physical. In a disorderly squeeze, exchanges protect the system. They halt, they change rules, they cash settle, they invoke emergency clauses. It has happened in other metals, and when that happens, paper holders discover the difference between exposure and possession. A contract is a promise, a share is a claim, physical is metal, no counterparty, no forced settlement, no reference price, just ounces. That's why the script draws a bright line. The real war is not spot price. It's deliverable supply. So here's your ending, rewritten to keep the intensity without turning into a compliance nightmare. You don't need more debate. You don't need more theories. You need to recognize what this memo represents inside the narrative. The final boss hit the panic button, covering operations. 6.2 billion ounces, 6 months, a modeled target of 412. If this timeline is even partially correct, then January and February are the window where the market still looks normal right before it stops being normal. Because once the covering becomes visible, once the dominoes fall, the move will be too fast for the crowd to process in real time. And 5 months from now, if silver is ripping and supply is frozen, people won't be asking, is this real? They'll be asking, why didn't I move when it was still quiet? This isn't financial advice. This is a war report, an alarm, a signal. If you understand what you're looking at, you already know what comes next. The countdown started at 4:47 a.m. And if JP Morgan is buying